My name is Zola, and I'm the daughter of two Holocaust survivors, Chayela and Israel, later known as Xavier, who were born in Vilna in Poland. My father, Israel Uton, was born in 1919, and he was the only child of Zacharias, a highly respected medical doctor and city councillor, and Vava Goldman, who was a feisty Russian Jewess. My grandparents, whom I never met, were divorced when my father was very young. Zacharias remarried, and my father lived in both homes as a child. As a child, my father was great at sports, but he preferred stamp collecting and writing. He was editor of his school magazine, and as a teenager began publishing short stories in the newspaper. Soon after my father's bar mitzvah, his mother went to live in Paris, but my father visited her often. And during one of his visits to her, he stayed longer and attended Paris's École Supérieure de Journalisme, University College, to study journalism. My grandfather, Zacharias, really wanted my father to become a doctor too. As an only child, wanting to please his father, my dad applied for and won a scholarship to study medicine at Columbia University, New York. But with Zionist ideals, he also applied for and was accepted into the Haifa Technical College to study journalism in Palestine. Unfortunately, my father attended neither, as his father suffered a heart attack. He survived, but he was now sickly. And so my father chose to stay in Vilna to care for him. My father began working as a journalist, and he covered sports and cultural events for the local paper. One assignment he remembers so fondly was at City Hall. He was to write about a 15-year-old girl, Chayela Rosenthal, who was performing a lovely Yiddish song written by her older brother Leyb Rozental. He thought she was amazing, and that song soon became a hit on the radio. My father wrote an excellent review, and a year later wrote a story for the newspaper Youth Truth about that same young Jewish girl who had just won a national singing competition and had been chosen by the Vilna Cultural Association to represent Vilna in an upcoming international folk song festival to be held in Russia. It was 1941, and Chayela never made it to Russia. Just days before she was meant to leave, the Germans invaded Poland. My mother was born into a richly cultural family. Her father, Nachum, owned a printing shop, and he was the owner-editor of the Uvent Courier daily Yiddish newspaper. Her older brother, Leyb, was a political activist and satirical writer, songwriter, and poet. Leyb was also part of the Young Vilna Literary Society, and at the age 14 already had a book of his poetry published. His poems, along with stories and articles that he would write, were regularly published in the local newspapers too. He wrote many scripts and songs for the YISROLIK Yiddish puppet theatre, where my still school-going mother also sang and did voiceovers too. While my mother excelled at maths and science, gymnastics and ice skating, and even tutored other students in her class, she loved singing the most, and she could regularly be heard on the radio singing her brother's songs, until one was drowned out. Her voice interrupted by the incoming German Stuka planes flying over her beloved city, Vilna. 2 days later, her father was forced out of his home and marched to the Ponari forest, never to be seen again. And not long thereafter, my mother, together with her mother, brother, and sister, were taken out of their homes too. They were forced into the Vilna Ghetto. My mother, in the ghetto, was just a 17-year-old girl, but very soon earned the wonderful title songstress of hope, Wunderkind star of the Vilna Ghetto. Despite the awful conditions in the ghetto, her sweet, soulful, and joyful personality shone through when she performed her songs on the stage of the Ghetto Theatre. She would lift spirits and provide hope, bringing back good memories of home, of love, and even laughter. And thus she inspired the free and releasing emotional expression of all her audiences. The theatre was a place where the community could come together for comfort and support, where their feelings, fears, and thoughts were validated, where they could laugh together at the absurdity of their situation, and it was a place where their humanity and dignity was restored, even if only for an hour or so at a time. The theatre productions and songs also provided a much-needed distraction and a temporary escape from the pain and the suffering and the harsh reality of daily life in the ghetto. Because the Jews had lost so many family and friends, killed in the Akzione and massacred in the Panari forest, the idea of performing music and theatre in the ghetto was initially met with much opposition by many who claimed, "You do not play theatre in a graveyard." But the Judenrat leader, Jacob Gens, knew that it would be good for the spiritual morale of the community and that it would also save lives. A theatre would provide legitimate work and work permits for actors, writers, musicians, artists, and more. And so the concerts began, and from the start they proved to be sensitive, dignified, and uplifting enough to placate all those naysayers. It soon became clear that the community largely benefited greatly in many ways from the establishment of musical, theatrical, and other cultural events. The first performances were held in the Rudnicka Street School Hall, where the Judenrat had their offices. But soon, due to the increasing number of audiences, the theatre was then moved to the old municipal hall on Konska Street, with an official opening of this Vilna Ghetto Theatre in April 1942. It was sponsored by the Judenrat's cultural department. Initially, audiences were made up of the administrative elite and German officers. But soon Jacob Gens realized that he could also use the reviews as an opportunity to promote his work for life agenda, which he began to do in the opening speeches he gave to the audiences that were now open to all inmates. Theatre performances included symphony concerts, choir events, and 4 full-length dramatic plays. One play, titled Grüne Felder, had my mother playing the leading female role. Here are some posters advertising some of the music concerts and other cultural and literary events that took place in the ghetto. These are a few of the 200 posters that were discovered after the war. The first few music variety concerts held in the theatre included unrelated musical pieces, some orchestrations led by the conductor Wolf Durmashkin, choir performances, puppet shows, songs, poetry, and theatrical readings. These individual programs were only performed once. This is the poster from the very first music concert, in which my mother performed the song YISROLIK, that was written in the ghetto by her brother and Misha Wexler, who composed the music. This is one of the more well-known songs to emerge from the ghetto and is still sung by many today. While in the ghetto, Leyb's song lyrics focused on ghetto life, and YISROLIK, which means Little Israel, referenced the nickname given to orphans. There were many orphan children in the ghetto, children whose parents were taken away and killed in the Akzione. The orphan boys who had to fend for themselves survived as smugglers on the black market, selling cigarettes or saccharin. Leyb's boy YISROLIK tells of how, despite his sad situation, he would rather whistle and sing his song than dwell on his sorrows. And though he often felt alone, like a field in the wind, he still knew that he wasn't born in the streets and that he missed his parents he had that once loved him. He tells others, "Is better as mir red nicht." Better we don't talk about our sorrow. Just think about tomorrow. These sentiments so many inmates could relate to. And I've heard many survivors say that it was their theme song in the ghetto, and even years later when they thought back about their experiences. They were all children who lost their family. They were all little YISROLIKs.
Polskie Papierosy, no polskie saccharin, geworden kein teure billig Werk. A leben voller Groschen, a Brute ein Partie, und Ghetto-Händler hat ihr doch gehört. Hey, YISROLIK, ich bin das Kind von Ghetto. Hey, YISROLIK, a heftiger dicker Jung. Hat verblieben, volle Netto, der lang ist, als noch a triste una gut. Hat verblieben, volle Netto, der lang ist, als noch a triste una gut. A Mantel und a Kragen, sagt ihm und a Rot, a losen Kopf. Nor soll mir Geschichten, nor werfen mir Versagen, zu lachen, oh ja klar, kann ich jenen und wenn es weiß, wer bin ich. Hey, YISROLIK, ich bin das Kind von Ghetto. Hey, YISROLIK, a heftiger dicker Jung. Und verblieben, volle Netto, der lang ging eins noch, hat ich und a gut. Und verblieben, volle Netto, der lang ging eins noch, hat ich und a gut. Nur von mein Treue, besser als man Rest nicht, eins mein Liebe, ohne Werte Rest viele mehr.
Mein Name ist Chayela Rosenthal. Ich lade ein zu freuen sich mit dem, was wir haben, und zu dermonen sich das, was es ist gewesen. Und wer kann besser dermonen, was es ist gewesen, wie die altitschke jiddische Mame, welche sagt: Weil was gewesen, ist nicht da.
I was as a child thrown to the Vilna Ghetto, and in order to survive, I joined a youth theatre which was organized in the ghetto for the inmates. And my brother was a very well-known poet and writer, and he started to write songs for me. And I sang them to the inmates, and they were songs of courage, not to give in, protest, nostalgia, and humor. We Jewish people, we've got such a strength in ourselves that we can laugh at ourselves in the greatest chores what we have.
Als ich weiß nicht, als warum ist mir das so? Jeder sagt, du verstehst nicht. Was verstehen? Leg weg, Bertje, dein Hämmer und fahr sie besser als wie es fühlt sich, sing azoi, was es fühlt sich, wenn du lebst, glücklich und frei. Dai, 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 spielt es, das Fiedele, fiu, 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 spielt der Fleidl, rut, 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 der Trompedel, und der Bass, bye, 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 bye. Dai, 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 dai. Wachsen Kinder und vergessen, Mames Nest und Ruhe und Schlaf. Wachsen Kinder und vergessen, dem Baschitter von die Schaf. Wachsen Kinder und vergessen, Mames Nest und Ruhe und Schlaf. Wachsen Kinder und vergessen, dem Baschitter von die Schaf. Was meinst du, Narle? Ja, nicht verstehen. Was meinst du, Narle? Mit dein Geweih. No, wenig Narle. Du besser lach. Auf welche Mädel, die will nicht schämen sich, leben sich, wenn es mit der Reggae.
I have to tell you that they tried to crush us. They did not succeed. We are celebrating and continue and go from strength to strength. And the most important thing, we must not forget. Thank you for listening to me.
My uncle Leyb also wrote songs for the youth club, the Jugendclub, that held special events and social meetings. He mostly wrote his poetry and his songs at night. By day, Leyb's job was working at YIVO, the Jewish Scientific Institute. He was hired because he was fluent in German, and he was to transcribe lists, cataloguing important Jewish literature, manuscripts and books that were to be shipped away to Germany, to be destroyed, or to be archived as evidence of a Yiddish culture. Leyb and some other workers and literary writer friends, including the poets Kasheginsky and Sutzkever, who all later became known as the Paper Brigade, began to save valuable manuscripts, books, and documents by hiding them and giving them to trusted Poles, and smuggling them into the ghetto to hide in sewers, basement walls, and other secret places. Talmudic scripts, books, and other precious literature were used in the still-functioning Strashun Library, in the synagogue services, and at special events hosted by the Literary Club. The event celebrating the lending of the 100,000th book from the library is depicted in this poster. The event was described by 13-year-old Yitzchak Rudashevsky in his diary, where he wrote, "Looking at the exhibition, we actually forget that we are in a dark ghetto. The mood of the celebration was an exalted one. It was indeed a holiday, a demonstration on behalf of Yiddish literature and culture." Shirley Gilbert noted in her book on music in the Holocaust that just in the Vilna Ghetto alone, over 40 new Yiddish songs were written. Probably more. Many of these were featured in the original full-length musicals known then as revues. There were 4 such revues, written predominantly by Kazriel Broido, Misha Wexler, and my uncle Leyb. The first revue, titled Korene Joren und Weh zu die Teg, Years of Corn and Days of Woe, and the second revue, Men kann gar nicht wissen, You can never know, were written in 1942. In general, the storyline texts and the song lyrics of each revue followed and incorporated the current experiences, events, and feelings of the ghetto life and their inmates as the days and the months went by. The theme of loneliness, Isolation and despair in the ghetto was very evident in Leyb's song Schottens, Shadows, first sung by Dora Rubina, and also in Kasriel's Broido's song, Bei uns ist ständig finster, it is always dark with us. But Leyb was also known to use his wit and humor and satire to allow audiences to laugh at the craziness of their own dreadful circumstances, like in the song, Men darf sich kennen halten, you have to know how to behave. In general, the song themes and lyrics very often expressed what the inmates could not or dared not say out loud. But there were also songs to inspire hope and the determination to survive, like in Leyb's song, Nicht gedeiget, es wird sein besser. Don't despair, it will get better. In the song, Ich bin schon lang do nicht gewesen, I haven't been here in a while, the song tells the story of the distribution of the work permits, the yellow shame. The audiences were also reminded of their once familiar, normal life's warm feelings of romance, joy, humor, and more, with songs like As a Liebe Spiel, all about a love affair, A Liebe von a Ghetto Moit, the love of a ghetto girl, and Ich hab sich verklobet, I fell madly in love. Other popular songs include Shmerka Kashiginsky's beautiful song Frühling, Spring, written after the death of his wife. Frühling, nimm zu mein Treue, take away my sorrow. And his song Stiller, Stiller, Hush, Hush. Stille, Stille, lass mir schweigen. Let's be quiet, where the music was composed by an 11-year-old boy, Alec Volkowiski, and also in Shmerka's song, Das Eltne Kind, the lonely child. Avraham Sutzkever's song, Unter deine weiße Stern, Under Your White Stars, where the music was composed by Avrom Brudno, and Hirsch Glick's song, Sag nit keinmal as du gehst dem letzte Weg, Don't say you're going on your last journey, are also still popular and still sung today. In staying current with ghetto experiences, the third review, titled Pesha von Resha, written in June of 1943, referred to the Jews who had just been sent to the Vilna Ghetto from Resha, another camp 30 kilometers away. The title role of Pesha was played by my mother Chayela. Pesha, the character, realizes that to stay alive, she must be strong and cheerful, even though she is lonely and homeless, all the while pretending to be part of a family of strangers just so that she can get a work permit. She sings about her crazy, abnormal life where sisters pretend to be brothers, grandmothers act like children, and strangers pretend to be married. But when Chayela, as Pesha, sang the song Ich BENK AHEYM, I long for home, everyone related to those shared feelings of mourning, of loss and longing for home that so many expellees and all those who had arrived in Vilna from other ghettos felt. And even the German soldiers attending the concerts cried.
Wenn Mensch bist jung, is groß dein Schwung. When you are young, desire burns. You leave the nest and learn to fly, only to find you can't return. Verlost, vergesst dein Heim, dein Nest. Die Zeit kommt nicht zurück. Wenn's kommt die Älter an, tust du sich an der Mann und trachst, was ist geschehen? What happened? Ich will noch einmal sehen mein Heim. Sie ist doch als dort wie gewähnt. Für Wend a Tischel und a Bank, I left my childhood over there. Ich BENK AHEYM. I long to see my home again, just as it used to be back then. Mein Schwester's paintings on the wall, the rug I tripped on in the hall. Mein arm Heim, I miss my home. Ich will noch einmal sehen mein Heim. The piano we all played back then. My mama's flowers she would grow, my tata's favorite radio. Ich BENK AHEYM. The steps on which I scraped my knee, the wooden gate, the lemon tree, these precious memories I keep, weil die Zeit kommt nicht zurück. Ich BENK AHEYM. Ich BENK AHEYM.
While prisoners were being sent out of the ghetto to camps in Estonia and beyond, the song Pack sich ein, pack up, resonated so strongly, as it was time to pack again a little suitcase and leave, to places or fate unknown. But everyone still sang the song with new hopes that perhaps they would soon be liberated. Leyb's song, Zu, 1, 2, 3, Zu, 1, 2, 3, which means ahead, 1, 2, 3, became the anthem of the progressive Jewish youth, and it was also one of the main stirring songs of defiance, resistance, and optimism that the partisans took with them into the woods, singing as they marched. Because coming to the theatre created a legitimate place for many of the community to come together at once, the writers would sometimes cleverly hide phrases in their scripts that would share important news, highlight acts of corruption, or give information about underground meetings, organized resistance, or even divulge escape plans. The fourth and final review, Moshe halt sich, Moshe, hold on, was written and performed in the autumn of 1943, just as more prisoners were being deported to labor camps outside the ghetto. Moshe, the character, concerned that he would not be able to hide or escape the ghetto, is encouraged in an uplifting title song to hold his head high and to keep believing that freedom was coming and to keep striving for a better tomorrow. Right up to the last days of the Vilna Ghetto before its liquidation, the audiences came to this review, and despite wondering if the next day would be their last, they all sat in the theatre and sang along to the inspiring lyrics that held the promise of freedom, ultimate victory, and vindication. Leyb's song Wir leben ewig, We Live Forever, shows the strength and the courage of the people who, in face of such suffering and hardship, proudly sang, "We will survive and overcome and thrive. We will live forever. And yes, despite our enemies trying to destroy us, wir seien da. We are here.
We live forever, the world's ablaze. We live forever, without money these days. We'll show the enemy we will not play their game, and we will not hide our faces in shame. We'll live forever, here we all are. We'll live forever, in every hour. We want to live and to survive. Bad times will overcome and thrive. We'll live forever. We are still here. Wir leben ewig, es brennt a Welt. Wir leben ewig, ohne Groschen Geld. Und auf Zepuke nicht die alles sonnim, was willen uns verschwarzen unser Pondim. Wir leben ewig in jeder Show. Wir leben ewig, wir seien da. Wir wollen leben und erleben schlechter Zeiten, aber überleben. Wir leben ewig. Wir seien da. We are still here.
All these songs, remembered and later written down by survivors, today provide important historical evidence as they chronicled the people's pain and suffering, their resilience and defiance, the humiliation, the terror and morale, the triumphs over tragedy and loss, their prayers and dreams of a better tomorrow beyond those walls, their hopes, courage and heroism despite their fears of imminent death, and yes, even their remarkable sense of humor. The courage, will, and powerful spiritual resistance of so many inmates of the Vilna Ghetto was evident in their determination to keep schools going, to keep the Sabbath, to celebrate their rich cultural life, the Jewish holidays, and in continuing to create music and art in the face of unimaginable tragedy, obstacles, and adversity. The Vilna Ghetto was liquidated in September 1943, 80 years ago from the time of this presentation. My uncle Leyb was sent to Camp Kluga in Estonia, where he was killed just days before its liberation. My mother, her sister, and her mother were sent off to Kaiserwald, where my mother's mother was killed upon arrival. Both my mother and her sister survived the labor and concentration camps, as well as the death march to the Baltic Sea. They were thankfully liberated on the beach by Russian soldiers in March of 1945. My father, who had also survived the camps and the death march, was liberated near Lauenburg, and he was told that there were some Vilna girls in an abandoned house nearby. He and his friends went there to invite the girls to rather come and stay at their place because Russian soldiers were taking advantage of the Jewish girls. It was there that he found my mother, whom he recognized and introduced himself to. Within a few days she was riddled with typhoid fever, and he nursed her back to health and into love. They soon decided that they would start a new life together, and they were determined to make it a positive, happy one, and they vowed to uplift others every day. My parents settled in an apartment in the pretty Hirschberg resort town, Jelenia Gora. My father had a chance meeting with an old editor that knew him from before the war, and he was able to secure for my father new identity documents with a new name and a new job. His new name, which was taken from his nom de plume, Xavier Piatka, also known as Xaveri. My father became the editor of the local newspaper. My mother immediately joined the Yiddish State Theatre group that traveled throughout Poland and Europe, doing many concerts and performances on stage. My mother also visited the various displaced persons camps scattered across the region, doing performances for them. It was during one of these performances that my mother met Molly Picon, the famous American Yiddish star who was visiting the DP camps. And when Molly saw my mother performing, she was so impressed that she was determined to arrange papers for my mother to get out of Poland and to bring her to America. Molly came through, and new travel documents arrived, and my parents went on to live in Paris, where my mother performed in Yiddish clubs, on radio and television, and recorded her first record albums. While the plan was ultimately to reach and settle in the USA, my mother was invited to perform as a guest Yiddish artist in South Africa. When she got to Cape Town, she fell in love with the beauty and the climate and the friendly people. And so in 1951, my parents made Cape Town, South Africa, their new home. In South Africa, my mother continued to perform in Yiddish and English productions and did many one-woman music concerts and comedy shows and a dramatic series on television. My mother also continued to travel overseas, performing all around the world, including Israel, and as leading lady in Jacob Jacobs's Yiddish productions on Broadway. Sadly, my mother passed away from cancer at age 54, just days after her final performance as the best Yiddische Mama, Golda, in Fiddler on the Roof. She is still remembered and missed by so many whose lives she changed for the better, and whose lives she saved through her music and her caring, and for those on whose faces she put so many smiles. I encourage you to listen to her songs on YouTube and to read more about her and about my father and Uncle Leyb on the website I created, Chayela.com. You can also read about their lives in my sister's book, No Goodbyes, a father-daughter memoir of love, war, and resurrection by Nava Piatka. No Goodbyes, a title fitting, for so many loved ones were taken away before there was time to say goodbye. There is also a full-length musical on YouTube that you can watch that my sister wrote and performed in about my mother's life. It's called Better Don't Talk. My sister was the torchbearer and the family Holocaust storyteller until she passed away in 2009. And it was in 2019 that I wrote my first song to honor all survivors, our families lost, their families lost, and as a promise to future generations. It is titled Hört sich zu. Listen, we will remember you.
Hört sich zu, wie wir singen, wie es klappen unsere Herzen, mit Rhythm von euer Leben, hört sich zu. Wir seien euer Kinder, wir singen euer Lieder, zu lieb euch wir seien da. We are here because of you. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song. With courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Hört sich zu, we will remember you. You're with us everywhere we go. We hold you safely in our hearts. We'll share with future generations all the lessons of your past, all your suffering and losses, and the pain that you've been through. will never be forgotten. Hört sich zu. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song with courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Hört sich zu, we will remember you. We have cried in all our tears the sadness of your darkest years, but the joy in your survival gives us life. Wir wollen euch keinmal nicht vergessen, wir wollen euch ständig gedenken. Auf EYBIK will mir singen zu lieb euch. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your song with courage, faith, and hope, with voices proud and strong. The world will know your life, your love, your legacy lives on. Hört sich zu, we will remember you. Hört sich zu, we